All right, folks, we might actually just make a start. I think waiting a couple more minutes isn't going to make a huge amount of difference to people we have with us today. If you're catching the recording later, welcome to the show. And we're back. We had a break in August where we did some reorganisation and chased a few goals, but we're back for September and we're planning on doing this every month. So let's dive in. By now, you probably already know the drill, but if you want to catch up on the older shows, I do note that July isn't currently available on YouTube, thanks to community member flagging it to me just prior to this call. But we do put each of the monthly calls, both for US and Asia and US and Europe and the APAC and India calls up on YouTube. Please do share. We do these shows because people are telling us they want to know more about what's happening in a time zone that's friendly to them. So we do these because we want to meet people where they are. So please do share and let know people they can come along. It's a good forum to ask questions as well if people want them. And then if there's any content that we're not covering that you would like to know more about, some new features or things that are happening in the broader Kubernetes ecosystem, we'd also love to hear as well by going to that link and giving us feedback on the content. So, as always, be respectful, be inclusive, have an open mind, be the learn-all, not the know-it-all, have a growth mindset. I think we all know this by now, but please, when we're engaging, particularly when we have an open mic at the end, take the right attitude and approach to those sorts of things. Today, what we're going to do is we're going to talk a bit about some announcements. I can see someone in the chat already talked about one of those things that we've announced just recently. We've got Raul here today who's going to do a bit of a deep dive on App Gateway for containers. Then we'll dive into our usual deprecations and retirements announcements before looking a little bit at some AKS roadmap highlights, both things that have just landed in preview or are about to land in preview and items that are about to go GA or have just recently GA'd. So you probably would have not failed to have noticed that AKS Automatic has gone GA in the last little while. So the team put together this nice little... So Automatic has been in preview for a little while and just recently GA'd. So last week we had the launch event for Automatic. So it's really meant as a good entry point into working in the Kubernetes ecosystem. So maybe you don't want all the overhead or need all the overhead of having to manage a full AKS cluster with all of the configuration options that you have there. So you can start with an opinionated AKS cluster configuration, which is AKS Automatic. So it comes with most of the settings that you need to worry about for a production-ready workload pre-configured for you. In some cases, those configurations are locked so that you can't make changes, and that's by design. So, if you need that configuration control, you probably want to go and use AKS standard. Having things like deployment safeguards baked in and enabled by default, using things like automated deployments, you can go from having code in source control to deployed in your cluster in next to no time with the right appropriate guardrails in place to do that. And then ultimately, over time, we will continue to add capabilities and features to Automatic to make it the best starting point to work with Kubernetes in Azure. So the launch event was 16th of September, 17th of September in our time zone. You can go and catch up on the live stream and hear from folks like Brendan Burns on the launch if you want to hear a little bit about it. If you do want to learn by doing hands-on activities, there is a hackathon coming up in October, and there is both North America and Europe and Middle East and also APAC. So I'm just going to leave that on the screen for a few moments so that if you want to get your phone out, you can scan that QR code for the APAC hackathon and get yourself involved in that in October. It's a good way to get familiar with working with Automatic. So hopefully you're taking a good look at that. And we expect that there'll be quite a lot of interest in Automatic. We're already seeing quite a fair bit of interest in that space already. Outside of the launch of Automatic, which was hard to miss if you work in Azure and Kubernetes specifically, AKS product group teams are going to be at a bunch of different events between now and the end of this calendar year. So there is a virtual summit actually happening this week, which was the Migrate and Modernize Summit. But we'll be at GitHub Universe at the end of October. Prior to the KubeCon North America event, which is happening in Atlanta in November, there is our standard Azure pre-day, so the Azure Day with Kubernetes on November 10th. So if you are planning on going to KubeCon North America, maybe make some plans to show up a little bit earlier and register for that pre-day. The product team will be at KubeCon North America. We've got some good talks coming up there as well. And there'll be a booth with demos and other things where you connect with the team if you want to give feedback or ask questions. And then finally, before the end of the year, we obviously have Ignite, which is towards the end of November. The AKS team will also be there as well. And as is always the way, we have lots of features coming up at both of those events. If you're looking for things to fill your day that are about AKS and the Kubernetes broader ecosystem inside of Azure, you can't walk past George Palmer's AKS Me Anything, now on season 2, on all of the platforms that you enjoy to listen to your podcasts on. Definitely go ahead and check those out, getting behind the scenes and talking to engineers and PMs across all of the capabilities that make up the cloud native ecosystem inside of Azure. Some really insightful discussions there, not just very lightweight, high level, go right into the details sometimes. So worth looking at if you want to know more about how we make things. Other thing that's worth checking out, this is a new series launched, being run by Lucky Evanson, who's a good old Aussie guy, has been holding his corner of the Aussie world in the States for a little while inside of the AKS. He's focused on talking to folks involved in the upstream work that we do. So we like to contribute back to the community that provides so much for us. So a lot of the work that we do inside of AKS is often being fed back out into the upstream projects that are either feeding into building capabilities in AKS or that we've originated and have donated to the community. So we're making sure that the flow is in both directions so that the work that we're doing benefits the broader community, and the work that the community does also benefits our customers as well. If you want to know more about that, definitely check out Upstream at AKS. And I think the first one here was an interesting episode. I forget off the top of my head what it was, but go ahead and check it out. And it's only just launched. Raoul, it sounded like you saw that session.
Yeah, I kind of in the same mental space as you are. Now don't remember what it was.
You had a blank. Yeah. No,
Yeah.
there's just so much going on. It looks like Luke might have some ideas. Needs to have a listen. Yeah, you certainly recommend it. Lockie's a great guy, as is George.
Yeah.
So both of them are very entertaining, and they're interviewing some interesting folks. We don't have a content spotlight this month, community content spotlight, but if you do want to contribute content and be in the spotlight, get highlighted for the valuable content you're producing as a community member, definitely go ahead and submit it to the community content link there that's on the screen. Make sure that you do select APAC and India if you want it to appear on this episode each month. But yeah, we're looking for more content to come into that space as well. So if you have some great blogs or some videos that you've done, please submit them and we'll take a look, and hopefully we'll see you on one of the future episodes. So I'm going to hand over to Raoul, who's been sitting patiently waiting to get to this point in the session today, who's going to talk a little bit about App Gateway for containers. I'm not sure if you can drive the slides or not, Raoul. If not, just let me know you want me to hop to the next slide.
I can try. No, these controls are not enabled for me. Yeah, if you can move to the next slide, thanks. So yeah, a lot of things that Simon already covered, and we'll be talking about a lot more on what's on our roadmap and what's been released next. Here is a feature deep dive that I would like to go through with you, which is a new offering called App Gateway for Containers. So before we start the discussion on what that offering is, I'd like to take a few steps back and start with the history. So before AKS was a service in Azure, we had a we still have a load balancer solution called Application Gateway, which is a layer 7 load balancer that used to work sit in front of applications deployed on virtual machines or our PaaS portfolio, such as app services or web apps. And it would basically make layer 7 load balancing decisions and route traffic over to the endpoints that are deployed on the infrastructure. When AKS came in, we extended application gateways capabilities by implementing the Ingress API. You might have already seen a lot of Ingress API implementations through other products as well, such as Nginx, which essentially implement those APIs and do pretty much the same thing. So they are a layer 7 load balancing solution that sits inside your cluster and then make application routing decisions based on it. So we implemented the Ingress API, brought in the application gateway Ingress controller. So there are two parts to it. One of which sits outside the cluster and another one that sits in the cluster. So the part that sits in the cluster, it basically monitors the cluster for any changes, and it uses the ARM API in order to make changes to application gateway, and then it makes routing decisions based on the rules that you configure in it. And it has a standard set of L7 load balancing rules that are there on the slide. For example, you can set up URL routing, cookie-based affinity, TLS termination, all of that good stuff. Now, we can move to the next slide, Simon. Thanks. Now we're moving from Ingress API to Gateway API. So Gateway, as applications Ingress needs are getting more and more complex, not very straightforward anymore. They're very flexible. For example, you want to route traffic to a subset of pods based on certain preconditions. Say, for example, you have deployed 2 versions of your application and you want to route a subset of traffic to one end while routing the rest of the traffic to another set of pods that are hosting another version of your applications. Those kind of policies couldn't previously be configured with Ingress API. And these capabilities and more are being developed in the Gateway API spec, which is an open source spec being built by the Kubernetes community. So we are now moving from application gateway ingress controller, the AGIC solution, to application gateway for containers, which is essentially an improvement or a replacement for AGIC. It implements the gateway API, and it is much more flexible than application gateway for ingress controller. So some of the additional capabilities that application gateway for container implements are on this slide. So for example, you can, as I said, route a subset of traffic to a set of pods of your application. It also implements a lot more protocols that are much more common now. For example, gRPC, long-lived servers and events, WebSockets, which were previously not there. Going on to the next slide. Yeah, so some of the new capabilities that the team recently released, and I will talk about the 2 key ones for which Jack has done a demo, which you can catch on the US version of this presentation, which will be up on YouTube very soon. One is native integration with web application firewall. So essentially, if you already have a set of firewall policies defined in your subscription, you can point application gateway for containers to those policies and essentially can reuse those policies for making routing decisions. So for example, if you want to block traffic from a certain IP address range or from a certain regions, you can have those policies documented centrally and have them integrated with AGC, and it will accept those policies before making the routing decisions. It's also one of the first services that is getting CNI overlay support. So traditionally, in the typical CNI setup, pods pick IP addresses from the VNet in which they are deployed, which means that if you have a very dense cluster with multiple pods, it might soon run out of IP addresses. To solve that challenge, we came up with an overlay solution where pods essentially pick their IP addresses from an overlay network, which is not part of the VNet. So they get their addresses from another address space altogether. Now, as you can imagine, with such setup, the implementation of a load balancer that sits outside the cluster becomes a little bit complex. If we now have support for the overlay network as well. So you can have your cluster with overlay network and still have AGC running on top of it, making the routing decisions. We have also recently released support for SSE regex rewrite. So for example, you have requests coming onto a certain endpoint and you want to rewrite the destination for it. Those capabilities are being have been built in AGC. Also, Gateway API, as I said, it's an upstream effort and it's continuously evolving. We now support the latest version of it, which is 1.2.1. So if you write any policies that are dependent on that certain variant of Gateway API, it would be natively handled by AGC. In addition to that, we have native integration with the cert manager, and also Let's Encrypt is one of the popular options that many people use in order to generate certificates for MTLS. So that is also available as an option for AGC. ALB configuration. So ALB is a component that sits within the cluster, looks at the changes within the cluster, and then again uses ARM APIs in order to modify the settings of AGC, which is sitting outside the cluster. Some of its configurations were becoming complex. We have vastly simplified the syntax that it uses in order to make the integration simpler. So yeah, apart from that, there is a good demo by Jack, which, as I said, is available in the US version of this presentation. So I highly encourage you to watch it.
I noticed he must have heard his name, because I noticed while you were presenting, Jack actually joined the call. I don't know what time zone or hour it is where he is, so I celebrate Jack for doing that. So look, I know you've talked a bit about there. I think you've done a really good job. I might just quickly bring Jack on screen if there's anything he wants to add into the mix. So, hey Jack, how are you?
Hey guys, doing really well. I apologize for being a little bit late here.
That's all right. It's I don't know what time it is where you are, but we appreciate you showing up. I don't know if there was anything out of what Raoul talked about that you wanted to add to, if there was things that you think it's important for us to highlight for the community when they look at this video.
Yeah, for sure. So I think you did the recap super well. A couple of clarifications. So Gateway API is currently in version 1.3 for stable release. I shouldn't say we, but the Kubernetes community recently announced version 1.4 and release candidate, I believe last week. And AGC will be conforming to version 1.4 in upcoming release. So we're keeping an eye on some new feature capabilities that are pushed into both of those releases. Similarly, on the simplified ALB controller, if you've been following App Gateway for containers, previously we used to run a Bootstrap pod and the ALB controller pods as well. One thing that we've done is we've released some cluster resources back by eliminating that Bootstrap pod from running in the cluster continuously. which kind of makes this a little bit more lighter weight. In terms of kind of upcoming features, one thing that I can talk about is private front-end support. That's kind of the common question that I get asked from everybody. Hey, we see that App Gateway for Containers works really well for internet-facing solutions, but how do I use it for services that are only exposed within my organization? And so we will be releasing support for private connectivity. Essentially, you'll be able to create a new front end that does not have a public IP address, and you'll be able to have that completely internal within your own virtual network. So I can't unfortunately share dates, but development has started on that, and we're very eager to make that available to the community as well. So stay tuned in a next discussion for that.
Yeah, everybody wants everything that's public facing to also be available privately as well. It's often more of a demand to have it private first rather than public first. So it's good to hear that that's an ongoing investment space as well. Look, unless anyone on the call's got any questions for Jack that they want to chuck in the chat, he can hang on and just check the chat for the next few minutes. I'm going to maybe let him make a move and move on to whatever he was doing wherever he is, whether it was watching a TV, sleeping, something other than being on a call about work outside of business hours. So look, Jack, we really appreciate you making the time today. But yeah, if you've got any questions for him, chuck them in the chat. He'll monitor it for the next couple of minutes. Otherwise, yeah, keep an eye out for what new features will be coming in AGC soon. And if you don't see them, Jack's the man to follow up with on it. You'll find him floating around on GitHub and places like that. So Jack, thanks a lot for hopping in today.
Yeah, for sure. So
Thanks, Jack.
one question from Luke around Fleet Manager. So there isn't anything specific to Fleet that App Gateway for Containers integrates into today. Fleet kind of implies that you're looking at multi-cluster scenarios. Just to clarify, App Gateway for Containers today is deployed to a single cluster, or its intent is a single cluster. If you do have, let's say, 2 regions, and you want to run App Gateway for Containers against both those clusters in different regions, or even if you had 2 clusters in the same region, our recommendation would be to front App Gateway for Containers with something like Traffic Manager or Azure Front Door.
Yeah, so we have a Fleet. Fleet has a Traffic Manager based DNS load balancing solution that would potentially solve some of that, but I don't know that it would integrate with App Gateway for Containers in its current state. But we're always looking for new ways to support multi-cluster scenarios with Fleet. Networking and load balancing is definitely one of those big asks, and there is work going on. So yeah, when I say not today, it's probably we wouldn't support necessarily App Gateway for Containers in its current configuration necessarily. It would be more that we would give you some ability to maybe spin it up and manage it out of Fleet. But yeah, there's no specific feature or capability yet that we're looking at for Fleet.
Yep. For customers that are using, let's say, Azure Front Door for multi-region deployments, one thing that we do recommend is leverage the header matching that's part of App Gateway for Containers to look for the custom front door identifier that's added as a header into each request. That's a good way to ensure that traffic has been or is originating through your Azure Front Door instance, not through another Front Door instance, or just an arbitrary request that's hitting the front end of your App Gateway for Containers front end. So that works really well for customers if you want to take advantage of the CDN capabilities that AFD offers and so forth.
Okay, good tip. You heard it here first. And it wasn't in the slide, so if you didn't watch the video, you didn't see it. So it's the value of showing up. All right, last chance. I'm going to bring down the virtual gavel and let Jack go. Any more questions before we let him go? Going once, going twice. All right, sold. Thanks a lot, Jack. Appreciate your time today, and enjoy the rest of your day.
Yeah,
Thanks,
for
Jack,
sure.
for filling in the gaps.
For anybody that is watching this, feel free to reach out to me. I'm always around. Jack.Schomburg@Microsoft.com. I'm always happy to chat.
There we are. You heard it here first. Thanks, Jack.
Yep. Cheers.
All right, let's hop into the roadmap. Yes, always love it when we get those tips and tricks that you don't see anywhere else. So I really appreciate him stopping by today. Timeline disclaimer, as always, you heard Jack kind of talk about it there. Timelines that we always give are estimates, albeit we'll probably be talking about items that are in preview or are in GA in today's call. So you can go and check the status of those on the public roadmaps. But anything that we talk about that is a future feature, typically we work really hard towards meeting the goals we set ourselves, but sometimes things happen and we don't. So obviously any timeline is subject to change. The numbers that you'll find in the next set of slides where they exist, just the GitHub issue numbers. So if you go onto the /Azure/AKS GitHub repo and go to issues, you'll be able to find more details about some of the items that we'll talk about through the next few slides. So I always like to start with deprecations and retirements because they're kind of important. If you don't know about them, you can be caught on the hop. There's a few big ones coming, all mostly in the compute space. This first one has been coming for a while, not just to AKS, but Azure as an all up. So at the end of this month, so actually in 6 days' time, virtual machine availability sets, or VMAs, will be completely deprecated and retired, and that will impact any clusters that are currently using VM availability sets for their capabilities. If you want to continue to run your clusters in a healthy state, you need to move to using VM node pools before the 30th of September. And there is actually a command line interface migration tool available to help you with this. So if you go to that GitHub issue number, you'll find more details about the CLI tooling you can help to make that migration if that affects you. Hopefully you're already well aware of that, if that is something that has been on your radar and you have already done that work to mitigate that risk. Next one is Windows Server 2019. It's going to retire in March next year, so you do have a little bit of time to deal with this. From up until the end of February, you can continue to use Windows Server 2019 on any Kubernetes cluster in AKS up to 132. You can't, if you're using higher than 132 already, you cannot use Windows Server 2019 for any Windows node pools. So you're already sweet as far as that goes. But if you are running any versions below 133, it's probably worth looking at moving to a newer version of Windows Server for your Windows-based node pools. And then this last one, this has already passed. So you're probably already seeing issues if you haven't remediated this in your environment today. So Azure Linux 2 was retired at the end of July. The way you resolve any issues that you're having is by moving to Azure Linux 3. Typically, if you're doing node pool upgrades for your clusters, you will probably found at some point that you will have moved from Azure Linux 2 to Azure Linux 3 automatically through that upgrade process. But if you haven't, it's worth going and finding out more details on that and making that change ASAP, because there's no more updates coming for Azure Linux v2. So that's it for deprecations and retirements. Let's talk about public preview. And because I get to steal the microphone when it comes to this time zone, I'm going to talk about a couple of Fleet Manager features first, which you wouldn't have seen if you followed the US and Europe version of this get together. So just in the last 2 weeks, Fleet shipped a couple of features. So we're now providing you with approvals as part of our update run staged capabilities. So before you enter a stage or a group of clusters, or before you leave a group or stage of clusters, you can define approval gates that will pause the update and require someone to either manually go in and say it's okay for the update to proceed, or you can perform an integration using an event grid event that's sent when those gates are reached, so that you can do things like pre-approver. You can create a ticket in ServiceNow to approve it, to allow the update to start, or you can run health checks after a group of clusters have been upgraded to make sure that those clusters are in a healthy state before allowing the run to continue. So that's now available. We're just finalizing the documentation on the eventing side of that, but you can find the documentation for approval gates as a general concept already available on Microsoft Learn. And then the next one is a one that we expect will be pretty popular as well. We've had auto upgrade for Fleet for a while now. It's been GA since February. Until this feature shipped, if you wanted to stay on a particular Kubernetes miner and not automatically move to a new miner version as they became available, you didn't have that option. Now with Kubernetes miner version control or Kubernetes target version control, you can set a Kubernetes miner for all of the clusters in your fleet. Upgrade will make sure that your clusters are upgraded to that version if they support it. And then once they're on that version, they will just receive patch updates until the end of that Kubernetes miner version as supported by AKS. And if you are using LTS on your clusters, you can also enable that for that upgrade channel. And we'll continue to upgrade your clusters just on patch versions while they're in LTS. And then when that version is completely end of life, you get to choose what you do, whether you upgrade to the next miner version or you hop to the most recent miner version and then re-enable that capability. So that's two features we think are going to give people a lot more control and value for keeping their Kubernetes and node image versions up to date in their clusters. Hopping on to AKS. So everyone is talking about MCP. So MCP server for AKS is going to give you the ability to create bridges between AI tools like GitHub Copilot and Claude and working with AKS clusters. So basically with this, you can do standard AKS tasks like creating, updating AKS resources or fetching cluster details and including support for Fleet as well. So there are certain multi-cluster scenarios that you can now do as well. So we do have a blog post and a video up online that walks through how to work with the MCP server, but with this, you've now got the ability to build agentic solutions that can control AKS clusters in Azure, which is pretty cool.
Even on its own,
it's
always fun to talk to the cluster in English rather than kubectl commands.
And it's interesting because oftentimes in this space, we assume that everybody that works with Kubernetes knows a lot about Kubernetes, and the reality actually is that increasingly people understand less and less about Kubernetes because there's a lot to it. So natural language interface to services that run on Kubernetes is absolutely a really good use case for these sorts of AI solutions. I think natural language is a really good way to work with this stuff. So yeah, if you're interested in doing that, definitely take a look at the MCP server for AKS. Multiple load balancers. I don't know if you've got any insights or thought on this one, Raul. I've got some notes here, but given this is a space that you work in, maybe you've got some insights you want to share on this one.
Yeah, sure. So essentially, load balancers have some constraints on them. So for example, you can write up to 300 load balancer policies per load balancer. Now, if you have a very large cluster, you might need a lot more than 300 load balancer policies. So that's where multiple load balancer comes in. So essentially, you can attach load balancer to a node pool and then define policies for that load balancer in especially for that node pool. And that's how a single AKS cluster can support multiple load balancer and can scale based on your needs. So this is our way, one way in which we support very large clusters with a lot of rules and also a lot of IP addresses.
And it's a pretty common pattern as well. Like cluster sizes getting quite large, particularly in the AI age, where oftentimes a lot of the work is done on not many clusters, but the clusters that there are do have a very large footprint. So I think this sort of scale at an individual cluster level is important for us to solve, which it sounds like we're doing, which is great. The next one, which is managed namespaces. So just to plug for Fleet, we have a Fleet version of this coming as well. It's currently under development, but the one that's here is managed namespaces for AKS. So what managed namespaces provides you with is the ability to take a namespace, Kubernetes namespace, create it as an Azure Resource Manager resource. So it shows up as a resource in Azure. And then what you can do is you can assign Azure APAC users and groups to that namespace and have that applied when people attempt to connect to that namespace. That will be a mechanism that will allow the cluster to validate that the Entra ID user that's trying to connect into the namespace has permissions to do that. And there's a way to delegate access to just that namespace to users and groups without having to give them access to the entire cluster. Additionally, on top of that, you can also enforce resource quotas. So to start off with, it will just be CPU and memory. But as you can imagine, we might extend that to other things over time, like GPUs as well. And also apply network policies. So this is about controlling ingress and egress of data into and out of your clusters. So that's available today in preview. So it supports both AKS automatic and AKS standard clusters. The Fleet version will be very similar, but with Fleet, the variation will be that the RBAC is applied once and then on the managed namespace at a Fleet level, and then can be rolled out to multiple clusters across your AKS ecosystem, and just have that user access control applied in one location without having to then go and manually apply it across every single cluster in your environment. But managed namespace is a good place to start if you're trying to do multi-tenancy basically in your clusters today, and aren't really that familiar necessarily, as Raoul said, with using kube control and working with the Kubernetes API. Next one, local DNS cache. I don't know if you know anything about this one, Raoul. We can maybe talk to this one as well.
Yeah, I know a fair bit about this. So essentially, why we built this solution, first of all, a bit of background. So for resolving DNS requests, the key service that we have in any Kubernetes cluster is core DNS. Now, core DNS is just like any other service, right? It can get overwhelmed if there is a lot of traffic coming to it. So a local DNS cache essentially is a resolver, a DNS resolver that's available on the node itself. So every node will have sort of a DNS resolver available within it, which from time to time pulls in the data from core DNS, so that if anything within that node wants to resolve the DNS, it doesn't have to take the round trip to one of the core DNS pods and get the DNS resolved from there. It can easily look it up in the node, look at the DNS records available in the node itself. So this is very useful in the case of applications which essentially need to make a lot of core DNS requests and often end up overwhelming the core DNS resources. So you can have a local cache available within the node. And just because you don't need to make that round trip to one of the to another node that's hosting the core DNS pods, it saves a bit of time for resolving the DNS request. And since it's a cache locally available, it increases the throughput of DNS requests in AKS as well. Yeah, that's what this service is for.
Let's hop on to GA. So AKS Automatic, we talked about that right at the top of the call, so I won't go into too much detail on that. There is a bunch of documentation already available on Microsoft Learn if you want to go and explore AKS Automatic in more detail. But now that it's GA, it's now ready for production workloads, so you can go and start looking at that as a good place if you want to quickly enable AKS with sane defaults. Alongside of that was the GA of deployment safeguards. And basically, deployment safeguards are a set of pre-configured rules that allows, basically, you can put controls in place that stops workloads being deployed into your clusters that maybe break some guides that we publish. So you can basically stop problematic workloads actually landing in your clusters to start off with. So this capability is available both in AKS Automatic and will be available in standard AKS standard as well. So basically, it's a way to safeguard those deployments. I think the name is spot on for what it's trying to do. Is it's trying to stop you putting broken stuff into your clusters to start off with by validating that what you're trying to deploy meets a set of guidelines that we have defined. Node Auto Provisioner or NAP. This one has been coming for a while, and it was something that we talked about previously back in July, but I think it's an important one to highlight. It's if you're familiar with Carpenter with a K, which is how AWS does this sort of scaling, and it's an open source project that originated from AWS. The NAP is using Carpenter under the covers, and even Fleet uses some of the Carpenter logic as well to drive placement based on cost of compute inside of your clusters. So if you're looking for more flexibility and better capabilities in your nodes, if you enable NAP and you give it a good set of defaults, you can find that it will do a much better job of right-sizing your nodes over time than you might get through something like using just VM node pools and the existing autoscaler stuff that's built into Kubernetes and AKS today. So definitely have a look at NAP. There are a lot of outstanding questions on what comes next in NAP. I'm not the PM for NAP, so I'm not going to commit to anything on behalf of Wilson, who owns it. But needless to say, we're not standing still on NAP as shipped. It's just that the baseline is now available for those who want to use it. The basic to standard LB migration, I don't know if you've got any visibility or thoughts on this one, Raul, at all?
Yes. So basic load balancer has several limitations with respect to scale and also feature set. So we are advising everyone to move to the standard load balancer since the basic one is getting retired as well. So there is an easy migration path available. Just copies over the settings from basic LB to standard LB. But yeah, any new clusters that you create with load balancer as the output get a standard load balancer out of the box, and we're encouraging customers to move from basic to standard LB.
The thinking seems to be, from what I understand, is that most production clusters are probably already using standard load balancer at a minimum. So it's probably only older non-production clusters that maybe are still sitting on basic load balancer. Probably the fourth function here is that the basic load balancer, again, a bit like some of the stuff we talked about under deprecations, the basic load balancer is being deprecated Azure-wide as of 30th of September. So if you've got older AKS clusters that are using load balancers, you probably just want to go and check to make sure that they're not using basic, because that will stop working in the not too distant future, and make use of the tooling to migrate yourself into a supported configuration sooner rather than later. Don't know about static egress gateway. I don't know if you've got anything on this one as well, if you know anything about this. I'm throwing you all the networking stuff today.
I'm happy to take them. So static egress gateway is essentially a feature by which you can have a certain node pool in your cluster dedicated just for egress. So traditionally for egress, what happens is that there is a SNAT operation that takes place, and pod IP gets translated to the node IP, and then that IP is used, is visible to the receiver when it receives the traffic from your cluster. The static egress gateway, you can have a dedicated node pool. So you have a static set of IP addresses, fixed set of IP addresses that are used for egress traffic. That helps you build much more fine-grained policies, for example, in your firewall, to deny a certain type of traffic. With this new feature, what's happening is that you can define a public IP prefix that will be used by those nodes that are hosting the static egress gateway. And IP addresses with that prefix would be used for any outbound traffic, which, as you can imagine, will help you greatly simplify your firewall policies or egress policies. Can essentially put a rule over a certain prefix and can rest assured that the traffic is going to come with an IP address that has that prefix.
Yep.
Yeah,
I believe there's a private version of that coming as well. This is just part of the story, is you'll be able to configure the same private networking additionally.
Yes.
Yeah. All right, cool. LTS support for the Keda add-on. So if you've worked with LTS, you'll know that sometimes add-on support in LTS can be a bit of a challenge, and that's because when AKS takes on the LTS management of a cluster, basically we are doing out-of-community support and backporting issues from upstream into older releases of Kubernetes to fix issues. So we take on that management of that work ourselves. And then obviously once you start deploying AKS managed add-ons into those clusters, we then needed to additionally take on the work of backporting fixes for those add-ons as well, because typically the add-on lifecycle for things like Keda is that they'll revise minor versions typically, only through minor versions of Kubernetes as well. So we continue to work on better LTS support for the add-ons that we do offer. So with this change now, we can say that if you enable LTS on a cluster and it is running Keda, that it is supported. If you go to the LTS documentation, you'll see which add-ons are not currently supported, but we continue to work forward on adding additional support for things like Istio as well. So over time, we hope to close the gap on all of those add-ons, although it's important to note that we maybe won't get necessarily to all of them, depending on the demand and the use that we see across our ecosystem. And then the last one, I kind of know a bit about this one, but Raul, I'm happy if you wanted to talk to it, if you know anything about it as well. This one's a pretty cool one, I think, but it's a bit interesting. It is GA, but it's only GA with some limitations. I don't know if you want to talk about that.
Yeah. So first of all, API, so VNet integration essentially helps you bring the API server within your VNet. And that essentially helps you talk to your API server via an endpoint that's IP address that's within your VNet, rather than using the public IP address of API server. It's getting gradually rolled out region by region, because it comes with a new type of underlying hardware that is getting deployed in different regions. And do you want to talk about the limitations?
Yeah, no, that's okay. No, so the documentation for VNet integration lists the regions that it is already available in. So it's worth checking that out if you are interested in knowing more about it. It is going to be the preferred way of doing API integration in future. So the Fleet Manager Hub cluster makes use of this capability as well. So our integration with this is in preview, but we're now moving it to GA now that the VNet integration is in GA, and we'll be moving that to be our preferred way of integrating. And it will be the future way as well. Once this is available in all regions, I think you'll probably find that the legacy way of doing integration will be deprecated, albeit that doesn't mean it goes away tomorrow. There'll be a runway for that to happen. But yeah, if you've got any clusters that need to integrate with virtual networks, this is definitely something you want to have a look at if you haven't already. All right, so we managed to fill 50-ish minutes with today's call. I don't know if there was any questions. If you want to chuck them in the chat, we've got only a handful of people on the call, so I'm happy to take any questions in the chat. Otherwise, I'll give folks a few minutes back in the afternoon. I don't know if anyone wants to chuck anything in the chat. I get my virtual gavel out like I did with Jack. I need to buy myself a real one. Go online
exactly.
and get like I can just sit here and just go clack off the screen, and then the call just cuts and done.
Yeah, exactly. A digital one.
All right, so the chat isn't going wild, so I'll take that to mean that no one's got any questions. We will be back next month. Please do spread the word to your friends and colleagues. We'll do a better job of making sure that we get this into people's inboxes and calendars sooner rather than later. But if you go to the community calls link on our website, let me just grab the links to chuck in the chat for you all, which I have here somewhere. Where are we? There we are. You can basically get every month, we just update this link and you'll be able to go ahead and join the call without having to do any sort of registration, which I think is pretty cool, because most of the time with these sorts of events, you need to go through about 16 million steps to register to actually get into most of the calls, whereas with this one, we like to keep it nice and easy. Let's just post those links. So there's a lot in there. I'll give you a few moments if you're on the call just to copy anything out of there that's useful to you, because once the call finishes, you probably won't have access to that chat anymore. But yeah, it's been a good session today. Really pleased that Jack managed to join us. Raul, as always, good to catch up with you, and thanks for mucking in with the content. I'll give people another 30 seconds of me rambling so they can copy any of that content out of the chat. All right, so thanks a lot, folks. We're going to wrap up for today. Take care, and we will see you in October. Wow, October already. Amazing. Bye for now.
Yeah. Thanks, Simon.